There's an old, battered piano tucked into a corner of one of the busiest train stations in the country. Every single Tuesday, for longer than most regulars can remember, an old man sits down and plays. Most people walk right past him. Briefcases, headphones, eyes on their phones, just background noise in a building full of noise. But on one particular Tuesday, the day every train in that station ground to a dead stop, a stressed-out, unraveling corporate lawyer wandered into that same quiet corner, just looking for somewhere to fall apart in private. By the time the train started running again that night, she wasn't the same woman who sat down. This is Arthur and Elena's story. Give me a few minutes. I think you're going to want to hear how it ends. Grand Central Terminal moves about 250,000 people through it on an average day. Under that famous vaulted ceiling, painted with constellations that are, so the story always goes, actually backwards, a mistake nobody in 100 years has bothered to fix. Almost nobody looks up. Almost nobody looks at anybody. Tucked into a quiet corner near the west stairway sits an old upright piano, scratched top, a few yellowed keys. The kind of piano that's absorbed 10,000 different hands over the years. A commuter killing time before a train, a kid showing off for her dad, once, a stranger who sat down and played something classical for 40 straight minutes and never said a word to anyone. Every Tuesday, right around the same hour, one man sits down at that piano. Arthur, 78 years old. Gray wool coat, no matter the season. He never announces himself. He just plays, mostly slow jazz. The kind of unhurried, melancholic music you'd expect drifting out of a bar at 1 a.m, not out of a train station at rush hour. Most days, almost nobody stops. A few coins land in an old coffee can by his feet, though anyone who really looked at him would guess he doesn't need the money. If you got close enough, you'd notice a small brass plate bolted to the piano's side, the engraving worn soft from years of hands brushing past without ever really reading it. Arthur always notices when somebody's running from something. 20-some years behind that piano teaches a man how to read a face in about 2 seconds flat, 300 feet away. Though it might as well have been a different planet. Elena was living out the worst day of what had already been the worst month of her career. 39 years old, senior associate at Kendrick & Vance, one of the biggest corporate law firms in the city. 6 years spent chasing a single word. Partner, like it was oxygen. 3 weeks earlier, the merger she'd spent nearly 3 years building. Nights, weekends, a honeymoon she'd postponed and never rescheduled. Collapsed 48 hours before closing. The client walked. $40 million in annual billing, gone in a phone call that lasted 4 minutes. Nobody fired her. That's not how it works at a firm like hers. Instead, they were quietly transferring her to run the small satellite office in Omaha, a polite demotion wearing the costume of an opportunity. Everyone in that building understood exactly what it meant. Careers didn't grow out there. They went there to end quietly. She'd requested the train instead of a flight, told herself it was for the extra work hours. The truth was simpler than that. She wasn't ready to arrive. Elena reached Grand Central that evening with one rolling suitcase, a one-way ticket folded soft from being read too many times, and a phone that would not stop buzzing in her coat pocket. She was 200 feet from her platform when the departure board flickered, and every line on it changed at once. Delayed, delayed, delayed. A signal failure somewhere out along the tracks had frozen the entire terminal. Every train. No timeline. No answers. Within minutes, the main concourse turned into something closer to a pressure cooker than a train station. Thousands of exhausted commuters stacked on top of each other, all fighting for a signal that barely existed. Rolling suitcase wheels. Crying kids. Somebody shouting into a phone about a missed connection. All of it building into one solid wall of sound. And that's when it happened to Elena. It started in her chest, a tightness, like a hand slowly closing around her ribs, then her pulse, hammering somewhere up near her ears. The crowd stopped being individual people and became one enormous, closing wall. Her vision narrowed at the edges, the whole concourse tunneling down to a single point of light. She had to get out, not outside, just away, away from all those bodies, all that noise. She pushed toward the quietest corner she could find, gasping for a full breath that wouldn't come. That corner happened to be the one with the piano in it. Arthur saw her before she saw him. A woman in a gray suit, knuckles white around a suitcase handle, breathing like she was drowning on dry land. He didn't call out, didn't ask if she was okay. The last thing a person in that state needs is one more question. He simply changed what his hands were doing. The slow jazz faded out mid-phrase. In its place, something lighter drifted up. Debussy's Clair de Lune, soft as moonlight, each note landing like a single drop into still water. Elena's breathing slowed before she even understood why. Arthur kept playing, eyes on the keys, and said, without looking up, "There's room right here, if you want it." Every instinct built over 6 years at Kendrick and Vance told her to keep walking. Handle it alone. In a bathroom stall, the way she always had. Instead, she sat. "You don't have to talk," he said. "Just sit a while." They stayed like that for almost a full minute, his hands moving, hers folded tight in her lap. Then, without breaking the melody, he reached over, took her right hand gently by the wrist, and set 2 of her fingers down on 2 separate keys. "Press here, whenever it feels right," he said. There's no wrong note in this one. She hadn't touched a piano since she was 14. A chipped upright in her grandmother's living room, abandoned around the same time she'd decided sleep was optional and law school wasn't. Her fingers found the keys anyway. Some part of her hands still remembered what the rest of her had spent 25 years forgetting. She pressed. A single note rang out, landing clean inside his melody, like it had always belonged there. She pressed again. Around them, something shifted. A businessman slowed his stride, then stopped completely. A woman lowered her phone. A father crouched down and pointed the piano out to his daughter. One by one, the churning, frustrated crowd of a delayed terminal went quiet, pulled toward that corner the way people are always pulled toward something true. When the song ended, neither of them moved right away. Elena finally noticed the little brass plate on the piano's side, close enough now to read it. In Loving Memory of Vivian, SHE always S8A, song ISNT finished you until somebody ELSE, here's IT. Who's Vivian? Elena asked quietly. Arthur's hands went still on the keys for the first time since she'd sat down. My wife, he said. 41 years. Not this exact piano, but not so different from the one she had. He told her the rest plainly, the way people only tell the truth once they've made peace with it. He'd been a concert pianist once. Carnegie Hall by 26. 2 decades of concert halls across 3 continents. The kind of career most musicians spend their whole lives chasing. Then Vivian started forgetting things. Small, at first. Where she'd left her keys. Then his name, some mornings, for long, confused minutes at a time. Early onset Alzheimer's, the doctors called it. Arthur canceled his next tour before the ink on that diagnosis was even dry. People asked me constantly if I regretted it, he said. Walking away right when I was at the top of it. I never did. Not once. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about music. The notes were never the whole song. The silence between them is where the meaning actually lives. I got 8 more years of silence with her. Nobody was ever going to convince me a concert hall was worth more than that. Near the end, when Vivian didn't always know his name, she still knew the songs. He'd play, and something in her would surface, just for a few minutes, like the music was a rope thrown down to wherever she'd drifted. After she passed, Arthur donated this piano to the station in her name, started showing up every Tuesday. Not for money, not for anyone to notice him, just to stay close to the one thing that had never once forgotten her. Arthur studied Elena for a long moment. Then he asked the question outright. That train you're so afraid of missing, where's it taking you? Omaha, she said. The word came out smaller than she meant it to. Is that where you want to go? She opened her mouth for the automatic answer. The one about opportunity, about keeping her head down, about playing the long game. Nothing came out, because the honest answer was that she didn't know. She'd been sprinting for years toward a version of success she'd stopped actually wanting a long time ago. Somewhere in the running, she'd forgotten to ask where the finish line even led. Arthur didn't push. He just let the silence sit there between them, the same way he let it sit between his notes. Her phone buzzed against her leg. Then again. 3 messages from the managing partner, back to back, each one a little more clipped than the last. She looked at the screen for a long moment and felt nothing. No fear, no urgency, Just 3 lines of text from a life that, sitting on that bench, suddenly felt like it belonged to somebody else entirely. She turned the phone face down beside her. An announcement crackled overhead. Signal issue resolved. Service resuming on all lines. The terminal exhaled all at once. Thousands of people surging back into motion, the ordinary chaos of Grand Central snapping back into place like nothing had happened at all. Elena stood. She pulled the one-way ticket to Omaha out of her coat pocket, walked it over to a trash can by the stairs, and let it fall. Then she opened the train app on her phone. A few taps. A new one-way ticket. Destination: Rockport, Maine. A small coastal town she'd found on a map 11 years ago, during a summer she could barely remember anymore, and had never once let herself actually plan a trip to. She bought it before she could talk herself out of it. Elena turned back toward the piano to say goodbye, but Arthur had already gone back to playing. Slow jazz again, eyes down on the keys, exactly the way she'd found him. He glanced up once, gave her a small, knowing nod. Didn't stop playing. Didn't need to say another word. Elena walked toward the exit. Somewhere behind her, out on the platform, a train pulled away from the station. Not hers, not anymore. Carrying somebody else's Tuesday toward somebody else's Omaha. Most of us are running toward something. A promotion. A deadline. A version of ourselves we think we're supposed to become by a certain age. We fill every quiet moment with more noise, more motion, more running. Because stopping, even for a second, means having to ask where all that running is actually taking us. Arthur didn't hand Elena a new life that Tuesday. He handed her 10 quiet minutes and 2 keys on an old piano. Everything else she found on her own, in the silence he made room for. You don't need a delayed train and a stranger at a piano to ask yourself the same question he asked her. That thing you're sprinting toward right now, is it actually where you want to go? Tell me in the comments. If you want more stories like this, hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.